Hey guys, welcome to the YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about this Michael Jackson movie because the Michael Jackson movie is starting to expose something that I think makes mainstream media a bit uncomfortable. And that is that nobody is standing by anymore for what professional reviewers and critics care for. Now at the moment, the Rotten Tomatoes score, as it's filmed right now on Saturday, the 25th of April, the Rotten Tomatoes score for critics is sitting at 39%. But the audience score is showing something quite concerning. It's at 97%. So you have this Rotten Tomato from the critics, while it's a great red tomato from the fans that go and see it, the audiences. And this is exposing something that mainstream media is very uncomfortable with. The fact that back in the past, people would stand by to be told what to think. They would stand by and be told, hey, everyone should go and watch this movie because this movie is great. Or, hey, don't go and watch this movie, this is going to disappoint audiences. Now, for weeks we've heard from critics come out and say, oh, this Michael Jackson movie doesn't go hard on the allegations. There's a lot of stuff here where they gloss over. It's very much just a jukebox movie. It's very much just his greatest hits. These are some of the criticisms that we've heard from critics. Very much criticizing who Michael Jackson was and kind of a predetermined outcome on the man, on who he was, what he was accused of, and so on. But when you look at the allegations and the movie's not addressing them at all, firstly, there's a lawsuit that they can't actually talk about the allegations from what I've heard. But also, the movie is framed as a celebration of life, of who Michael Jackson was. And while a big plane goes over, there is a lot of aspects of this movie that don't look great under a critic's lens. Yes, there is stuff that is ignored in this movie. Like Quincy Jones wasn't in this movie as much as there should have been an acknowledgement of the people who Michael Jackson worked with. Now, obviously, Janet Jackson didn't want to be in the movie, so Janet Jackson isn't acknowledged. But when you look at critics, something about the mainstream media and the way they've portrayed this movie is exposing. See, for years and years, critics are very much guided by the corporation they're under. Whether they're the big news organizations of the world. I'm not going to mention certain names here, but we all know the biggest one in the world. But for years and years, that organization has controlled the news outlet in Australia. I'm talking obviously about the Murdoch family. And while some people prefer that style of reporting, it's not people... Look, if you're predetermined to go on that side and that's the news you want to hear, then yes, you're going to go to that. Some other people prefer outlets like Sydney Morning Herald and The Guardian. So everyone has a news outlet and someone they trust. But when you look at what's happening with movies at the moment, it's something quite concerning that I think mainstream media still haven't figured out. And that is people and audiences in particular are not standing by saying, oh, I need to hear what Dickie on the Today Show says. I need to see what... Back in the day, we used to have Bill Collins. Obviously, Bill Collins has passed away, but back in the day, you would hear Bill Collins. What did Bill Collins think about this movie? You would wait for the critics, Roger Ebert, if you're in America. There are a lot of people who used to give their opinion and it would drive audiences to movies. Now, in the day of the creator and the influencer, that's kind of went away. Now, I think what drips from this and what people actually want when they want to watch a movie review is they want authenticity. They want someone going into a movie without a predetermined outcome of, oh, Michael Jackson was accused of this, so we've got to be politically correct and make sure that we don't offend anyone. Anyone can punch out 1,500 words when they're under a deadline. Oh, all right, Michael Jackson did this, but it didn't go hard on this. People don't want that. People want authenticity. That's why a 30-second TikTok review will be more important than a 1,500, 2,000 word essay about why it's no good and why this movie shouldn't exist and, oh, they should have went harder at the allegations and where's the Jeffrey stuff. People will not accept it like they used to because the influencer has exposed that... And when I say the influencers, I mean the influencers of the internet, the TikTokers, the YouTubers, the people on Instagram who influence the public. A 30-second TikTok can do greater work for a movie's publicity than a well-thought-out publicist on, the Today Show or Sunrise or wherever you get your news from. Nobody is waiting around for these critics anymore because we know that, especially with commercial media, we know there is some sort of incentive to report a certain way. Hey, the corporate line is we had issues with this person in the past, so the corporate stance on this is that no, we got to report on Michael Jackson a certain way. And sometimes people are just like, oh, I believe the allegations of, even though he wasn't found guilty in court, people are like, oh, well, I believe he's guilty, so I'm going to report a certain way. You will never replicate the authenticity of someone who just went, I just want to go and see Michael Jackson because I like the music, I like the Thriller, I like Bad, I like the Jackson 5, I just want to relive the music and how it was made. And some of them are like, hey, I want to hear what Michael Jackson's story was like. I want to hear what he experienced through Joe Jackson and what his brothers experienced and so on. Some people going with that mindset. But there is no predetermined outcome of, hey, as a fan, I'm going to watch the Michael Jackson movie because I want to hate it and I will need to type up 2,000 words under a deadline. This is why the mainstream media keeps losing ground to influencers. And what I'm talking about is sometimes with the modern generation, we forget how famous Michael Jackson was. Now, I've seen comparisons. I've seen, oh, Britney Spears was as famous, or hey, Justin Bieber was as famous, but he was the YouTube era. I can guarantee if you put Justin Bieber in the middle of Africa where they have no TV and no radio, they probably will not know him. Now, some people might, but the fame of Michael Jackson was something huger than any pop star will ever be able to replicate again. You put Michael Jackson, as I said, in the middle of Africa, the most isolated tribe in the middle of the Amazon, or I don't know about the Amazon, but, most people, Michael Jackson was the most famous person on planet Earth. One of the most famous people in history. When he was alive, he was definitely the most famous person on Earth. And you might say, oh, but he wasn't more famous than the president. Yes, he was. He wasn't more famous than Elvis. Yes, he was. He wasn't more famous than the Pope. Yes, he was. This is what I'm talking about. Michael Jackson was on a level that nobody else was on. I've seen people who know nothing about music, but they go, oh yeah, Michael Jackson, Thriller, yeah, the Thriller and the Glove, and the Glove has transcended to a level where even the most switched off person to mainstream media and the mainstream and what audience is going to see know who Michael Jackson is. So we underestimate these days just how much power the name of Michael Jackson still has. And when audiences were being told by critics for weeks leading up to this that this is going to be a flop, nobody's going to go see this, it will struggle to make its money back, the audiences were never going to accept that narrative because A, it sounds cheap, B, it sounds like someone doesn't understand truly what the narrative and what the story is trying to tell, and 3, it's Michael Jackson's music. It's music that influenced the 80s, the 70s, the 60s with the Jackson 5. It's music that, up to a certain point, because this movie does stop at bad, it's, up to a certain point, it's music that has influenced generations. And if you go, obviously there might be a part 2 to this movie. The part 2 will probably go into Dangerous. The part 2 will probably go into History. The part 2 will probably go into Madison Square Garden. This Is It tour that never happened. It'll go into all these aspects. It might even touch on the sort of scandals around him. But people are not being told by mainstream media, hey, don't go and see this movie and it's going to struggle, but it's going to be a flop. It's a total flop. Look at the audience. The audiences are dancing in the aisleways. Now, it's happened so many times in the past couple of years where we've heard from mainstream media that, oh, that movie's going to do terribly because nobody wants to see a Michael Jackson movie. Nobody wants to see a Minecraft movie. Who's going to go and see this? And then it's blown away all expectations. Who wants to go and see it? The audiences do. And we forget how famous Michael Jackson was, as I said. He was also one of the most powerful men in music. Keep in mind, for Michael Jackson, a black man, let's call him what he is. He was a black man. Even though sometimes it didn't look like that on camera, he was a black man. Keep in mind, this man was the most powerful man in music, in entertainment. You might say, oh, Tommy Mottola or Sony. Michael Jackson owned 50% of Sony, or some of a controlling interest, because he owned ATV. They merged with Sony, and Michael Jackson owned 50% of Sony. ATV is the Apple people, not Apple, the computer people, but ATV owned the Beatles catalogue. When Michael Jackson bought the Beatles and then sold it into Sony, he controlled part of Sony. Michael Jackson had so much power that he wielded that it's undeniable that this man was as powerful and undeniable in terms of his fame. Nobody can ever replicate it. Now, as I said, People say, oh, Justin Bieber was on the same level. Oh, Usher was on the same level. Nobody ever came close to Michael Jackson. This is why. When you look at mainstream media, they're still trying to portray a narrative of control. Hey, don't go and see that. We still believe in authority, like the authority that we hold. You know, the masthead of the Sydney Morning Herald or the Guardian or, you know, News Corp. They're all going to say, hey, this is our thoughts on the movie. Now, some say, yes, this is a good movie. Some say, no, it's not a good movie. Everyone has their agenda. As YouTubers and influencers do, we all have an agenda as well. We all love a movie or we hate it, but we come on and we talk about it. Everybody has an agenda. But when you're under a deadline, most people don't sit there and say, oh, I've got to jump on YouTube later tonight. Now, some do. Some people might say, oh, I need to jump on YouTube later tonight and talk about the Michael Jackson movie. I did a review when I came out of the cinema and came home and did it. I did one of those. But not everyone does that. Some people will say, oh, I didn't like the movie, I might not make a review. And that's why you see authenticity with creators. You see the authenticity. Authenticity is always going to sell. Now, I've seen some controversy with authenticity. People on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram have been saying, oh, you know, Fabio Jackson should have played Michael Jackson. He looks more like Michael Jackson in the 90s. Why didn't Fabio Jackson do it? That goes back to authenticity. Because authenticity will always trump a... Look, he might naturally look like that. It looks like Fabio Jackson has had surgery. But a very good lookalike. You have a real Jackson playing Michael Jackson. Jermaine's son, Jaafar Jackson, is playing his uncle. That means when he's doing the moonwalk and doing all the iconic moves that Michael Jackson made famous, and the Jackson 5, to the most part, also made famous, it's being done by a Jackson. And that's authenticity. That's why the movie is selling. When you watch it and you're like, okay, this is his legit nephew. This is blood, that the blood of Michael Jackson is in that Jaafar Jackson. That's why it was the perfect casting. That's why people are raving about it. You can see at certain angles that Jaafar Jackson is shot at, you can see that he looks exactly like Michael. And people have continuously said, oh, he was the wrong cast. I can't take him seriously. Do you really think this man could portray 90s Michael? They did a certain part in the movie where they talked about the nose job and so on. And from certain angles, he does look like Michael Jackson. But I am looking at the Rotten Tomatoes score at the moment. The Rotten Tomatoes score is telling about how out of touch mainstream media is with the audience that it tries to report to. Now, there are people who will sit there and say, oh, if Richard Wilkins is sticky, Richard Wilkins is saying on the Today Show that I don't want to see it, then I don't want to see it. News Corp people will say, oh, I need to watch what News Corp is saying or Sky News are saying about it because that's how I'm going to feel about it. Some people will say, oh, Channel 7's reporters are saying this. Oh, hey, you know, what's the other ones? There's New York Times reporters, you know, Washington Post, you know, all these other outlets around the world for news, CNN. People are like, okay, our favorite critics are saying this. But a lot of people are like, it's Michael Jackson, it's his music. I just want to see it off a curiosity. And then they go on to see it and they're like, that's not as bad as I thought it was. You know, the critics said this, but yeah, I can see why the Rotten Tomatoes scores are very high. People are getting into the narrative and the celebration. Michael's movie is about a celebration. It's a celebration of Michael Jackson's music, of his life. It's not about the scandal. There's more than enough documentaries out there that you can watch and educate yourself on. This is a celebration of music, a celebration of who he was. And look, critics are starting to lose their credibility, in my view. Because every time you go out with an agenda and say, I've got a deadline, I've got to have a deadline out by 12 o'clock on Thursday or Wednesday night. They typically get it out the night before. 12 o'clock the night before, I've got to have that written up. I've got to have 3,000 words about this movie, and we've got to talk about everything. We can't report on the movie unless we mention the scandal. We can't report on the movie unless we go into this part. But audiences don't want that. Audiences are going on TikTok and saying, oh, what is my favorite creator here? What did Tyrone Magnus think about it? What did John Campea think about it? What did Jamie think about it? That's where they're going. Because they want to hear from people who are just going to walk out of the cinema and said, yeah, it was a pretty good movie. I enjoyed it. That's what they want to hear. Oh yeah, I like the part where they did this. They could have done that a bit better. No mention of mention of Janet Jackson. Could have been better there. But yeah, other than that, I enjoyed it. Could have been a bit more Quincy in there. I know there's a lot of Quincy in Michael Jackson's past. They could have mentioned Quincy a bit more. Quincy Jones, I'm talking about. But you know, this and that. That's the authenticity of why people aren't trusting the critics. And that's why you're seeing the Rotten Tomato score be rotten for the critics, but be a gem of a beautiful red tomato when you look at the audience scores. Because of the disconnect. There is a big disconnect. And critics need to start looking at the audiences they're trying to report to are rejecting them. Let me say that again. The audiences that critics are reporting to are rejecting them because they're out of touch. Essentially, a lot of outlets are out of touch. The outlets are meant to be portraying to the public, hey, this is what the movie is. You can go and watch it for this reason, but you might want to not watch it for this reason, but it's your choice. Too often we see an agenda. It's called right wing versus left wing. Hey, the left, we don't like Michael Jackson because he's accused of this. The right wing, hey, he's one of the highest voted musicians of all time. He's one of the most recognizable figures. What happened to centered reporting? Unbiased journalism. You can mention, hey, it doesn't really touch on the scandal, but people are celebrating this. There's a lot of early screenings that are starting to like this. You can still give it your rating saying, for me, I wasn't big on Michael Jackson. Put it in the narrative. Put it in there saying, oh, you know, I went and seen this movie, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't my thing, but I can see why people would enjoy it. Very much mention it. But you see a lot of reports go out that are like, oh, I didn't like this movie. I didn't like Michael Jackson as a person, so therefore the movie sucks. Completely tearing down what Jaafar did on screen. Completely tearing down what everyone did when they made the movie. That's wrong of what critics do. And that's why they've lost touch, and that's why people are turning to TikTok, influencers, and the online space. If you like this video, like to drop a comment, hype the video. If you want to hype the video, go down to the comments, swipe across, and then you can hype it. You know, there's little bubbles above the comments. If you swipe to the right, like go that way, or that way, I don't know, it's back to front here, then you can press the hype. It's on the comments. You got to swipe across on one of them. And also, yeah, go follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Jamie Toomey Presents. And also, while you're at it, check out a few of my end screens. I'll put a couple of end screens here. I've got a gaming channel and a sports channel as well. I'll put it on either side. And I've got a couple of videos you can go and check out. I've also did a movie review about Michael, so you can go and watch that as well. I put that up the other day as soon as I got out of the cinema. And yeah, there's a few spoilers in that as well, but yeah, let me know what you think. And do you agree with this? Do you trust media outlets anymore? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.